Hi, this is Matt Baker, and today I'm once again going to rank the greatest dynasties from ancient history. Previously on this channel, I ranked the greatest dynasties from Europe, the greatest dynasties from Asia, and the greatest dynasties from Africa. In those videos, I limited my choices to the medieval and modern periods only, so roughly 500 CE to the present. A few weeks ago, I then posted a video in which I made a first attempt at ranking the greatest ancient dynasties with the help of several other YouTubers. However, several fans of the channel were disappointed with the result, mostly because I wasn't clear on the criteria, and I ended up including a dynasty of generals, a dynasty of priests, and a dynasty of philosophers. Therefore, I'm going to make a second attempt. This time, I'm going to stick with hereditary monarchies only, and I'm also going to use a criteria similar to the one that I used in my Europe, Asia, and Africa videos. So I'll be looking at three things: the size of the territory ruled by the dynasty, how long the dynasty stayed in power, and its overall influence on world history. So here we go. Greatest Ancient Dynasties, Take 2. Number 10. The Olmecs. In my first video, I didn't include any Mesoamerican dynasties. This was done for two reasons. First, because the Olmec writing system has yet to be deciphered. And second, because we know that later civilizations, like the Mayans, were based on city-states, not kingdoms. However, due to the massive influence that the Olmecs had on all subsequent Mesoamerican civilizations, I decided that they simply needed to be included on the list. We may not know the name of any of their dynasties or how exactly they ruled, but we do know that the Olmec civilization lasted for a very long time, from about 1500 to 400 BCE, and that they were very likely the initiators of every major Mesoamerican invention, such as writing, the long count calendar, and even the famous Mesoamerican ball game. So, based on the assumption that there was at least one long-lasting, very influential Olmec dynasty, I'm going to sneak that unnamed dynasty onto the list, even though in terms of territory, the area they ruled was quite small. Number 9. The Nubian or Kushite dynasty. A few people were surprised that this dynasty made my original list, but that's probably because they were thinking only of the 25th dynasty of Egypt, which was when the Nubians became pharaohs and were at their peak of power. But this dynasty lasted much longer than just the period known as the 25th dynasty. They held power in Nubia both before and after that period, lasting from about 800 BCE to the start of the Common Era. And in particular, after they ruled Egypt as the 25th dynasty, they were quite notable in terms of what they did in Nubia itself. From building pyramids to becoming a major center of trade, other than Egypt, they were arguably the greatest African dynasty in ancient times. In my opinion, greater than the later Aksumite dynasty. So, once again, I'm including them in my top 10. Number 8. The Gupta dynasty. Now, here's one that I didn't mention last time. The Guptas ruled North India from around 350 to 550 CE, so basically just at the outer limit of the ancient period. Their dynasty did not last as long as some of the other ancient dynasties, nor was their empire as large as, say, the Mauryans. However, 200 years and at least 3 million square kilometers is not too shabby. Plus, on top of this, they were extremely influential, especially when it comes to the history and development of Hinduism. Their reign was basically the golden age of ancient India, particularly in terms of Hindu literature. It was during their rule that key texts such as the Ramayana and Mahabharata reached their current form. Now, before I get some South Indians jumping in and stating that the Cholas were way greater than the Guptas, let me point out that the Cholas reached their peak during the medieval period, not the ancient period. And for this reason, I included the Cholas in my greatest Asian dynasties video, rather than this one. Number 7, the Neo-Assyrian dynasty. There were many great Mesopotamian dynasties throughout ancient history, from the first dynasty of Akkad to the Neo-Babylonians under Nebuchadnezzar. However, in terms of size of territory and length of rule, the Neo-Assyrians, ruling from around 900 to 600 BCE, were the greatest. On top of this, they were also very influential. For example, they have been described as being the first true military power in world history, being the first to use iron weapons and the first to use advanced military tactics. And although it would be the later Achaemenid Persians who perfected the administrative structures required for managing a large empire, it was the Neo-Assyrians who laid much of the groundwork. Number 6, the 18th dynasty of Egypt. It was during the 18th and 19th dynasties that ancient Egypt reached its peak in terms of size, power, and influence. However, because the 18th dynasty is the one that established the Egyptian New Kingdom, and because it lasted over twice as long as the 19th dynasty, from around 1550 to 1290 BCE, I think that it is the one that deserves the title of Greatest Egyptian Dynasty. Sure, it was the much earlier 4th dynasty that built the mighty pyramids. However, based on the criteria stated at the beginning of this video, which places importance on territory size, the 18th dynasty was definitely greater. It is for a similar reason that the Neo-Assyrians showed up on this new list in place of the earlier Akkadians. Number 5, the Argead dynasty. This was the dynasty of Alexander the Great. In terms of size, Alexander gets full marks. After all, he conquered a massive territory, all the way from Greece to the borders of India. And when it comes to influence, he also gets full marks. His conquests ushered in the Hellenistic Age, during which time Greek ideas and Greek culture spread throughout the ancient world. As I mentioned in my first video, when I talked about the Greek philosophers, one simply cannot underestimate the importance of Greek thought when it comes to the development of Western culture, and indeed, global culture. However, the Argead dynasty had one really big problem. It was extremely short-lived, being a dominant power for less than 20 years, between 340 and 320 BCE. Although its history stretches back farther when it comes to the relatively minor kingdom of Macedonia, when it comes to the Empire of Macedonia, the only two Argeads really worth mentioning are Alexander's father, Philip II, and Alexander the Great himself. So one has to ask, is a dynasty of only two great rulers really a dynasty? If it wasn't for this one major flaw, the Argead dynasty might have ranked higher on this list. But alas, it does not. Number 4, the Mauryan dynasty. This is the second Indian dynasty on this list. Although the Gupta dynasty lasted a bit longer, the Mauryan dynasty ruled over a much larger territory, perhaps as much as 5 million square kilometers at its peak. In fact, it was the only empire in ancient times to conquer almost all of the Indian subcontinent. It also had an incredible long-lasting influence. It is with the Mauryans, ruling from around 320 to 180 BCE, that the written history of India begins. Sure, the earlier Indus Valley civilization also used writing, but their script is undecipherable, and it went into disuse during the long Vedic period. But with the Mauryans, we get edicts written on stone pillars and placed all over India. We get large-scale administration of the subcontinent for the first time, and the spread of Buddhism and Vedic religion, So, in many ways, there is a direct continuation all the way from the Mauryans to modern India. Number 3, the Julio-Claudian dynasty. On my previous list, I included the Nerva-Antonine dynasty instead of this one, arguing that it was during their rule that the Roman Empire reached its peak. But as many people mentioned in the comments, there may not have even been a Roman Empire had it not been for the founding Julio-Claudian dynasty. Although Rome's first imperial dynasty lasted less than 100 years, from 27 BCE to 68 CE, it built the Roman Empire into the greatest empire that the world had ever seen up to that point, and perhaps the greatest empire of all time. The Roman Empire was, of course, huge, as well as incredibly influential on the rest of world history. As I mentioned last time, the fact that we still use Roman letters, Roman laws, and Roman architecture to this day are just a few small examples of their lasting impact. However, unlike other ancient empires, the Roman Empire was not ruled by a single dynasty for the entirety of its history. For this reason, a Roman dynasty will not be taking the top spot on this revised list, because, based on our criteria, there are 2 more ancient dynasties that were greater than that of the Julio-Claudians. Number 2, the Achaemenid dynasty. This is the dynasty that ruled the Persian Empire for over 200 years, from around 550 to 330 BCE. In terms of percentage of world population, some estimates have them ruling over 40% of the world, the largest amount for any dynasty ever. As a comparison, the British Empire at its height only ruled about 23% of the global population. But the criteria we set for this video was not based on percentage of population. It was based on territory size. And in this regard, the Achaemenids built the second largest empire in ancient history, coming in at around 5.5 million square kilometers. That's slightly larger than the Roman Empire and the Empire of Alexander the Great. In terms of influence, they were also super important. As we mentioned in the first video, the Achaemenids were the first to build an empire that spanned 3 continents, and they developed certain administrative structures and policies for managing such a large, diverse territory that ended up being copied by the various empires that came after them, such as the Hellenistic empires and the Roman Empire. Number 1, the Han Dynasty. Based on the 3 criteria that we set at the beginning of this video, size, longevity, and influence, the Han Dynasty of China was by far the greatest dynasty in all of ancient history. In terms of size, they ruled over 6.5 million square kilometers of territory. That's more than any other ancient dynasty. In terms of longevity, they lasted for over 400 years, from 202 BCE to 220 CE, with only a brief 14-year usurpation around the middle of that span. That's longer than any other well-documented ancient dynasty. And in terms of influence, they were extremely influential, particularly when it comes to the history of China and Asia. Although through the development of the Silk Road and inventions such as paper, their influence obviously went much farther as well. Okay, so that was my second attempt at ranking the greatest dynasties of the ancient world. Let me know in the comments, which version did you like best? The first one or this one? Or is there perhaps still a dynasty that you think I missed? Let us know. Thanks for watching.